Tyreek Hill just confirmed the one thing every Commanders fan was scared of, and that confession pushes Antonio Williams straight into the middle of Jaden Daniels' offense. Exactly what Jordan Reed at ESPN has been saying for weeks. In a bit, I'll break down why this confession also kills any shot of Hill signing in August, and why Williams could end up being the starting WR2 for Week 1. Meanwhile, DEEBO Samuel clapped back hard at Emmanuel ACHO after ACHO called him a glorified mascot, and that beef could decide whether San Francisco calls him back this week, even though ACHO never actually apologized for what he said, just how he said it. And to close it out, there's a 5'8" corner, Amik Robertson, who Durante Jones himself says is already running things out in Ashburn, and what Mike St. Ristel said about him is about to change how you look at this Commander's secondary, even though his physical ceiling still raises real questions. Raise hail. Okay, this one's wild, so let's take it slow. On Tuesday, Tyreek Hill posted a video to his YouTube channel that, if you're a Commanders fan who was still holding on to the dream of seeing him in burgundy and gold, is going to sting. He said, in his own words, that it's been 10 months since his 2 left knee surgeries, and that as of today, he still has no power in that leg. He's working to get it back, one day at a time, but the man who used to run like he had a cheat code activated, the same guy who ran the fastest combine time in modern history, cannot currently generate force in the leg that got wrecked in Week 4 last season against the Jets. Dislocated knee, multiple torn ligaments including the ACL. That's one of the worst injuries a wide receiver can suffer in his entire career. And we're talking about a guy who was, without exaggeration, the fastest man in the NFL at his peak. I'm gonna be honest with y'all about why this hits me so hard as a Commanders fan, and it's not because I thought Hill was signing with Washington next week. It's because all offseason, Hill's name was glued to the Commanders in every free agency mock draft, every landing spot article, every podcast. CBS Sports named Washington one of 5 ideal destinations for him. Analysts said Jaden Daniels urgently needs an elite-level second receiver next to McLaurin, and that Hill, even with the risk, could be that piece. And look, I get the argument, I could be wrong, but I get it. A McLaurin already established as WR1, plus Hill's speed, even at 70 or 80%, forces defenses to play scared on every snap. That opens running lanes, opens intermediate windows, changes the spacing of the entire offense. But this confession kills that fantasy, and it kills it at the worst possible time, right as the team reports to camp this week. No power in my left leg, trying to get all that strength back, Hill said, and he added something that sounds honest and brave to me, but also worrying, that he won't say what his timeline is, but that it, quote, looks good right now. Fam, I've heard that exact phrase 1,000 times from players who never came back the same. I'm not saying Hill is lying. I'm saying no power in the leg and it looks good in the same breath creates a contradiction that any general manager is going to read with extreme caution. And this also killed once and for all the Kansas City reunion rumor. Let's break that down tactically for a second, because the Hill to Mahomes connection was one of the most lethal in this league in years. They won a Super Bowl together, and Andy Reid himself left the door cracked open in February when he said Kansas City looks at everyone and everything. But a player who publicly admits he has no power in his leg 10 months after surgery is not a player any elite offensive coordinator is rushing to sign right now. Not Kansas City, not anyone. They need to see him run, they need to see him change direction without hesitation, and right now that doesn't exist, not even in a workout video. So what does this actually mean for the Commanders specifically? This is where I get critical with the front office, because I have a strong opinion, and I'm giving it to you straight. Washington let DEEBO Samuel walk. They didn't re-sign anybody with real weight at outside receiver during free agency. They brought back Dyami Brown, added 29-year-old Van Jefferson, and bet the entire 3rd round of the draft on a rookie out of Clemson. That's the plan. There is no hidden plan B in a drawer somewhere. Adam Peters did not chase Hill, and he did not chase Brandon Ayuk, whose situation in Kansas City has reportedly turned into a mess. And now, with this confession from Hill, any fantasy of a last-minute August trade or signing gets even further away. The veteran market, DEEBO, Keenan Allen, Stefon Diggs, Brandon Cooks is still out there, but none of them are walking through that door unless somebody currently on the roster gets hurt first. And that fam brings us straight to Antonio Williams, because if Washington is not going out to chase a big name WR2, then the entire weight lands on the shoulders of a 3rd round pick, 71st overall, out of Clemson. And here's the part that genuinely has me hyped. So let me explain why this isn't just rookie minicamp hype. Williams led Clemson in receptions last season, 55 catches, 604 yards, 4 touchdowns, and was first team All ACC in 2024. But what matters most to me as an analyst isn't those college numbers. It's what Dan Quinn and Adam Peters said about his route running. Peters, in person, called his route nuance advanced for a player at that level, and coming from a general manager who does not hand out free compliments, that's a massive signal. Let's get into the tactical language for a second, because this is where real analysis separates itself from filler content. What the Commanders are seeing in Williams is the ability to line up both in the slot and on the perimeter, thanks to his leverage reads and his ability to create separation without relying purely on raw straight-line speed. That is exactly what Amon-Ra St. Brown does in Detroit, and yes, I know that comparison sounds exaggerated 2 weeks before this kid plays a single down in the NFL, but I didn't invent that comparison. ESPN analysts and several camp beat reporters who've already watched him work live have been making it. Jordan Reed of ESPN put him as the second best underrated rookie in the entire 2026 class, right behind R. Mason Thomas of Kansas City, and wrote flat out that outside of McLaurin, Washington doesn't have a dependable threat in the receiving corps, so that should leave Williams with a lot of opportunity under David Blau's new scheme. Now, the uncomfortable question nobody wants to ask out loud: is it smart to put this much responsibility on a third-round rookie for the WR2 job on a team that wants to compete for the playoffs again? Look, let me be fair to both sides of this. The positive side, Blau knows the Detroit system firsthand because he was in that quarterback room, so he knows exactly how to maximize a receiver with St. Brown's profile, somebody who wins with technical separation and not laboratory speed. The negative side, and this is the part that actually worries me, rookie receivers, no matter how much they shine in OTAs and minicamp, almost always need time to adjust to the real speed of an NFL defense in the regular season, disguised blitzes and match zone coverages they never saw in college. Treylon Burks, a former first rounder, is coming off a strong spring and is going to compete directly with him. Luke McCaffrey, Dyami Brown, and Jalen Lane are all still in the mix fighting for snaps too. My personal take, and I'll give it to you straight, I think Williams ends up as the starting WR2 by week 1, not because the roster lacks alternatives, but because the alternatives available, Burks, Brown, McCaffrey, already showed their ceiling in previous seasons, and that ceiling isn't high enough. Williams brings something none of them have: positive uncertainty, the kind of uncertainty that scares opposing defensive coordinators because they don't have real game tape to prepare against him yet. And with Hill out of the picture by his own admission, and with DEEBO already gone elsewhere, Washington doesn't have room to wait around. Antonio Williams doesn't just have the opportunity of his life. He has the obligation to take it right now because there's no plan B walking through that door in August. Okay, deep breath, bro, because what's coming next is the complete opposite in tone. We're going from roster analysis straight into a verbal boxing match between an ex-commander and an analyst who picked the wrong player to go after. This is pure July drama, the kind of content the NFL produces when there are no games, and all of us are desperate for something to argue about. And this beef has absolutely everything. ACHO on his Speakeasy show alongside LaShawn McCoy was debating whether San Francisco should bring DEEBO Samuel back since he's still a free agent after his one season in Washington. McCoy said the 49ers were missing the spark DEEBO used to give them, and that's when ACHO, instead of agreeing, dropped one of the sharpest lines we're gonna hear all offseason. Word for word, he said, "I'm not gonna pay a glorified mascot top-tier money." Then he kept going in his own words, saying he's not interested in paying somebody to be a hype man. He's interested in paying somebody to produce 1,400 yards in a season. Fam, that's a direct shot to the jaw. There's no softening it. And ACHO didn't stop there. He followed up with the numbers in hand. DEEBO had 700 last year and 670 the year before. At the end of the day, DEEBO has had 1,000-yard receiving seasons. Just one. Now, before y'all think I'm gonna blindly defend DEEBO just because he played here in Washington, I want to be fair with the analysis, because that's the difference between a fan who just yells and a channel that actually understands football. ACHO is right about the cold numbers. DEEBO Samuel, across 7 career seasons, has exactly 1 campaign above 1,000 receiving yards, back in 2021 when he made All-Pro with 1,405 combined rushing and receiving yards and 14 total touchdowns. Since then, he's averaged 804 scrimmage yards over his last 2 seasons, and in 2025, with Washington, he finished with just 89 total touches, the lowest number since 2020, when he only played 7 games. Those are facts, not opinions, and ACHO isn't making anything up, but here comes my but, and it's a big one. Reducing DEEBO Samuel to a glorified mascot completely ignores the kind of player he actually is, and the kind of impact he creates outside of a traditional stat sheet. DEEBO isn't a pure vertical route receiver you measure only in yards per catch. He's what we call in tactical terms a joker, a player who forces defensive coordinators to prepare entirely different game plans depending on whether he's lined up as a receiver, as a runner behind the quarterback, or in pre-snap motion. In his first season with Washington, he finished with 72 catches on 99 targets, 727 yards, and 5 touchdowns, and according to PFN's wide receiver impact metric, he finished ranked 26th in the entire league in 2025. That's a player who produced consistently in an offense that, let's be honest, did not have an easy season. And here's the detail that makes this beef even juicier. DEEBO did not stay quiet at all. He went straight to X and fired this at ACHO, and I'm quoting the exact opening because that's where the punch lands. Glorified mascot, ha ha ha. Who is this, bro? From there, he kept going in his own words, asking who gave him a platform, reminding him he only played 3 years in the league, split across 3 different teams, and closing with a warning that he wasn't coming for him, but to stop trying him. That detail about the 3 years is a low blow with surgical accuracy, because it's true. ACHO only played 3 NFL seasons, from 2012 to 2014, with the Philadelphia Eagles, before retiring and becoming an analyst. DEEBO basically reminded him that a guy talking about other people's numbers had a pretty short playing career of his own, and fam, that's playing dirty but playing it well. The craziest part of all this is how fast it escalated. The very same day, ACHO went on his own show to apologize, though to be fair, he apologized for the tone and not the content. He said something like, "Let your apology be as loud as your disrespect," throwing the line right back at DEEBO in his own language, and he kept standing firm that a San Francisco return doesn't make football sense. His underlying argument, beyond the sharp words, is that San Francisco already has Ricky Pearsall as a first-round pick entering year 3, added a veteran like Mike Evans, and has Christian Kirk locked in for the slot. According to ACHO, plugging DEEBO into that room throws the whole roster out of balance and stunts Pearsall's growth. And honestly, that argument does carry tactical weight, even though the way he delivered it was flat out disrespectful toward a player who, again, actually produced for Washington last year. So what does all of this mean for us as Commanders fans? First, it's a reminder that DEEBO Samuel is still unsigned heading into camp reporting week, and that's unusual for a player with his level of recent production. Second, and this is what interests me most as this channel's analyst, it confirms the veteran receiver market is still very much alive. DEEBO, Keenan Allen, Stefon Diggs, and Brandon Cooks are all still out there waiting on a call and an injury in camp anywhere, including, who knows, Washington itself if something happens to Burks or McCaffrey could reopen that door. Would DEEBO come back to Washington? I wouldn't rule it out entirely, but with everything we just broke down about Antonio Williams taking real center stage, I don't see Adam Peters spending money on a 30-year-old receiver with an injury history when he already bet his draft capital on solving that problem from within. Alright, drama's behind us for a second, fam. Because what's coming now is a completely different kind of story, one of those that doesn't generate explosive headlines, but if you're somebody who truly understands the trench level of this game, it's going to matter to you more than you'd think. Let's talk about Amik Robertson, and I want to start by being completely honest about something. When Washington signed him in March for 2 years and $15.02 million, with a $6 million signing bonus and $9 million guaranteed, the fanbase's reaction was lukewarm, if we're not just calling it cold outright. And I get why. Robertson stands 5'8", weighs 187 pounds, and comes off getting cut by Detroit after a secondary role. He's not the kind of name that generates instant hype in a free agency market where everybody wants to see an immediate impact signing at cornerback. But here's the twist in this story, and it's genuine. It's not script filler. Since day one of OTAs, Robertson has been, according to multiple reports from the beat writers covering camp day to day, one of the strongest voices in the entire defensive locker room. Mike Sainristil already already an established starter in the secondary, said it in his own words after a practice, that Robertson is somebody who came in and challenged me from the jump, and that the two of them have been putting in extra work after every practice. That's a starter publicly acknowledging that the new guy, the one nobody expected to be relevant, is raising the level of internal competition. And let me get into the real tactical language here, because this is what makes Robertson worth analyzing beyond the size of his contract. Durante Jones, the new defensive coordinator arriving after 4 seasons building the Vikings secondary under Brian Flores, called him a pit bull, and that word wasn't chosen by accident. In the Flores scheme in Minnesota, which Jones is bringing to Washington with variations, secondaries need corners with genuine physical willingness for edge tackling and comfort playing in traffic, something you'd normally associate with bigger players, not a 5'8" cornerback. Jones had already been tracking Robertson from his years facing him twice a season when Robertson played for Detroit in the same division as Minnesota, and that cross-scouting history explains why Jones reportedly had a significant voice in the decision to bring him to Washington. The roster reality is this: Washington made small tweaks at cornerback this offseason without investing heavily in either free agency or the draft. Antonio Hamilton Sr. re-signed on a 1-year deal after standing out on special teams. Akello Witherspoon arrived, but with an injury history, that's a real concern, and that's where Robertson becomes the most interesting piece in the group, not because of raw physical talent, but because of the leadership void that was left in a secondary that was no way around it, one of the weakest units on the team last season. Now, the uncomfortable question, the one that honestly makes me pause, and I want to be real with y'all about it. Is leadership enough when the physical ceiling stays limited? Robertson is not a shutdown corner. He never was. Not in Las Vegas, not in Detroit. He's a player who competes with his heart, who plays bigger than his size. But in one-on-one coverage against bigger-bodied receivers, he can get exposed. And in the NFC East, against receivers like the ones Philadelphia and Dallas roll out, that's not a small detail. That said, and this is what genuinely has me optimistic, Washington isn't bringing him in to be the team's #1 corner. They're bringing him in to play the slot in shorter coverage windows where his compact build and aggression become a real advantage instead of a liability, while Mike Sainristil stays locked in as the other key piece of that interior rotation. My personal read on this? No hedging. Robertson is going to be one of those signings that looks unimportant on paper in March and ends up being critical in November, not because of individual interception numbers, but because of the multiplier effect that genuine leadership has on a young group of defensive backs still finding their footing under a brand new scheme with Durante Jones. That kind of player, the one pushing starters in every July practice, almost never makes the August headlines. But when October and November roll around and the secondary starts playing with a clear identity, that's when you look back and understand exactly why Jones fought so hard to bring him in. Alright fam, that's everything we've got for today, and look at the range of emotions we went through. From the real sadness of watching Tyreek Hill admit he still has no power in his leg, through the pride of seeing a third-round rookie like Antonio Williams get treated like the actual solution in this offense, then straight into the pure heat of a social media beef that left DEEBO Samuel firing back with interest, and closing out with the quiet but genuine story of a 5'8" corner building a brand new secondary through pure character. This is exactly what I love about following this team, season after season. There's never just one angle. There are always layers. There's always something to argue about. And this is just getting started because full training camp opens this same week. And trust me, the next upload is going to be even more loaded with the first real one-on-one battles between this rebuilt secondary and the team's receivers. If this video did something for you, hooked you, or just made you feel a little closer to this team, drop that like, hit subscribe, and tell me down in the comments, do you trust Antonio Williams to be the starting WR2 by weekend, or do you still think Washington needs to go find a big name before the season kicks off? I want to read every single one of your answers. Burgundy and gold, always. See y'all in the next one.